That's the ball. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon we're delivering a presentation on managing your employees with return to work, with the latest allowances by the government to allow businesses to resume work. Presenting this afternoon is myself, John Darcy, along with my colleague here, Julian Wanderers. With this afternoon's presentation, we're covering a wide range of territory. If nothing else, that the advice or information we provide are passed across. If you're doing everything that's in there, terrific. A lot of it's not mandatory. Some of it's options. We'll talk to the detail, but it's to help our clients in managing their return to work. Let's start. Okay, this afternoon we'll be covering the topics we'll be talking through. We'll be managing the workplace under Stage 1 return to work. We're not going to spend too much time on legal duties, but it's something that employers have to be conscious and aware of, and there is some legal risk and potential liability that comes with not managing those responsibilities properly. We'll point you in the direction of some useful resources, some that are available online, and some things that are probably worthwhile displaying in the workplace and making available to staff. And also issues outside the workplace as well that you still need to think about, other outside factors. This presentation is the third that Anitech have delivered on COVID-19. Julian's delivered 2 previous presentations, including work from home, which is clearly still an issue for some workers. And this presentation and the previous presentations can be made available from Anitech on request. Some of the slides we prepared today, we have no objections if you do get the slideshow, cut and paste them. There are some useful resources just in the slides themselves, so feel free to obtain them. You may find them useful to use for presentations to your own staff. Anitech will deliver further webinars as the issues progress. I was saying to Julian earlier today, I noticed a number of law firms and other consultancy firms are doing the same to help their clients out. And so we appreciate the importance of providing timely messaging for our clients to help them manage their business. Just like you, we too are guided by what we hear from governments at both state and federal level. And it is still a rapidly changing environment, and it's the whole COVID-19 is a moving feast still. Please appreciate that we do interpret and hear information differently. We're not going to get into politics in any way, shape, or form. We're not going to be saying Labor said or the Greens said or anything like that. That's not what this is about. And we're not talking about industrial relations issues, so we won't be covering off on JobKeeper or industrial relations wage type issues or employment related issues. We'll be talking about the health and safety aspects about managing return to work. With this slide, this is released by the Commonwealth, and it's outlined the 3-step program to return to work. Whilst there's a lot of colour and movement in that slide, it's obviously talking about economic issues and the like. We're going to get down to the practical safety issues, and obviously this one's aimed at the types of working environments. We will slightly drift into step 2, possibly when we talk about the arrangements are coming from 1 July with cafes and restaurants, with gatherings up to 20, but only in terms of giving you something to consider in terms of space considerations should anyone operate in those types of environments. But similar messaging to even office type environments around the spacing type issues, which we'll cover off in one of the slides later. But step 1, stage 1, where we are now, 5 visitors at home. My kids had a couple of friends around at the weekend, which is good to see. Obviously, I haven't been able to do so for a while, but 10 people in businesses and in public places. And so This is ground zero, if you like, for the return to work, where we cast our mind to how we're going to manage those arrangements. To the legal aspects, certainly Cedar Meats has got a lot of media referred to as a cluster. And as of Friday, when I prepared the presentation, 88 infections. I think they've had one or two more since then. And note that WorkSafe were mentioned that the company is now under investigation for for its management of the outbreak within that workplace. Now, I've dealt with WorkSafe many times over the years, and you have inspectors who visit and issue the improvement notices and entry reports, and obviously look at how they make workplaces safer. But if it is an investigation, well, then they'll also be dealing with investigators from WorkSafe, possibly with a view to potentially laying charges for breach of their duties under the Act. And if they are to lay charges, it's most likely going to be under that Section 21 for their failure to, so far as reasonably practicable, provide and maintain for the employees a work environment that's safe and without risk to health. Emphasis on health there. And so, in your own context, in your own workplaces, yes, this is where the buck stops. Your legal responsibilities. If WorkSafe are going to have an interest in your business, well, that's the section that's going to apply. The other section that's particularly relevant to health is Section 22, which is the duty of employers to monitor the health and conditions at the workplace. So it's quite explicit, and it's not just the physical health that applies under this section, also it's mental health as well. And certainly COVID-19 is also, there's been a significant increase in suicides across the country. It's obviously it's put a lot of trauma in terms of people there, in terms of work situations and financial detriments. And so employers do have a legal duty to monitor the health of their employees. And Julian will point to some resources later on that are worthwhile for employers to put to use. I cannot stress, importantly enough, the next section there, which is Section 35 of the Act, the employer's duty to consult with the employees. In terms of all the things we're talking about, my suggestion, you might use the slides, the resources that they make available, even just talking to your employees about their coming back to the workplace. Cannot stress how important it is that you have regard for that legal duty you have, that you do talk to them about making decisions about how you're going to control their safety going back to the workplace, making decisions about the adequacy of the welfare of the facilities, how the lunchrooms, the toilets, the hygiene issues that come with this territory. So please, for all the, it's good to have the posters on the wall or to have the sanitizer on the table, but make sure you have the important conversations with your staff about how you're going to manage the return to work.
Thanks, John. So I'm just going to chime in for a few slides. The first one we're going to look at is the transport to and from the workplace, in particular public transport. It's a bit of a tricky one. I know when I go to work in the city quite often, sometimes it's almost impossible to get on a tram because it'll be that packed. You'll just be waiting tram after tram after tram until you can physically fit on one. And now we're talking about some pretty strict social distancing measures. So this is going to be something that we're pretty much going to have to look at on a continuing basis. So definitely avoid public transport if that is possible. We are seeing a lot of, particularly our corporate clients, are now starting to alter their work hours just so they're able to take public transport outside of those peak hours. So, just before 9 o'clock, just after 5, it would, it'd be almost impossible to get on a tram. Certainly do continue to allow your employees to work from home if the public transport isn't a possible or a practical option. They may even be able to split in between the workplace and home as well. So we really do need to make sure that we are maintaining social distancing as much as practicable. Again, difficult on public transport, but we really do need to reinforce it. Wear masks if sharing cars or transport as well. We're seeing a lot of questions about wearing of masks, and it's a very mixed message about what to do with them. I'd certainly always recommend checking, health organisations, of course, like the World Health Organization, for continued advice on that. And shared cars, that they do need to be cleaned. So you think about not only public transport, but our own vehicles. There's a lot of touch points. It's an enclosed place. So look, our precautions really have to extend, not only in the workplace, but well and truly within our, our modes of transport as well. And John and I were discussing earlier, it's also a really important aspect to consider that you may have employees that aren't necessarily comfortable with taking public transport yet. So do keep that in mind with certain work arrangements.
Just be conscious in terms of there are offences under the legislation to discriminate against workers on the grounds of health and safety. But you have to have due regard, and that's part of that consultation process. That consultation process being that you have regard for what employees have to say, and so do take into account their concerns that they may not feel comfortable on public transport, for example. Talk about what other possible arrangements you can make. On shared cars too, if you have company cars or pool cars, be conscious of making sure that you make sanitary wipes and sanitizer available to wipe down surfaces in those. If you have more than one staff jumping into a car and then the next staff member, make sure you maintain those vehicles. Temperature testing. With the announcements for cafes and restaurants to be able to open from 1 June, the Premier emphasised in particular that they would need to have appropriate measures to monitor their staff, and part of that monitoring was having the capacity to be able to test people's temperatures. Some of our clients have done it. Some have had mixed messages, and a lot of it comes down to the quality of their equipment that they've purchased. Some feedback from staff, I might have high blood pressure, or I might have rode my bike to work. It's an indicative measure. It's not necessarily a certain measure that's just because someone tests high, but it's a safeguard just the same. It's certainly worthwhile, worth consideration. And certainly given the health services and governments are pointing to it as being a resource employers should consider, we said that you really have a green light, a blessing. But I again emphasise, do talk to your employees, do consult with them if you're going to implement testing of that type. Check the market to make sure you get good quality testing equipment. Some businesses have purchased equipment and found some mixed results by buying cheaper, poorer quality equipment. So make sure you do get the right gear.
So one of the things that we would certainly recommend here at ANITEC for re-implementing employees in the workplace is to jump on our website. We've got some tools that you can download absolutely free. They're also in Word, so you can pretty much make them your own. The first part is the workplace hygiene and infectious disease assessment. So it's a step-by-step tool which will just ask you a range of questions which will let you essentially gauge what kind of controls you may need in your workplace. So if you're finding it a bit difficult to know where to start, and I'd certainly recommend jumping on there and downloading that. The second part of that is the actual checklist to it. So what you can do with this checklist is once a day, twice a day, whatever you're comfortable with doing, you can have a scheduled assessment of your work site just to make sure that you've got adequate paper towels, that areas being kept clean. It's just those kinds of checks that really help make us feel safe in our work environment, or at least start getting some of that confidence back into the spaces that we work in, just to make sure that those basic level of hygiene standards are indeed implemented. So again, jump on the website and you can get those absolutely free.
And if you are not certain or not confident, give us a call here, and we certainly have Julian as an occupational hygienist. We certainly have the capacity to come in and do a value assessment for you if necessary.
So sorry, just going on from that initial slide, this is just two examples. So the first one is from the actual assessment tool. So you can see it's just very step by step, and it'll also give you some advice following whatever the kinds of questions that are prompted within the assessment. And then the second one is just from the checklist. So we can see here, you may want to just go around the site and just make sure, for example, adequate hand drying facilities are available. So again, absolutely free. And as John said, if you need a bit of help, then by all means, just get in touch.
With the social distancing and the 1.5 metre spacing, we need to contextualise that in terms of the work environment. We're talking obviously about fitting a number of people into square or rectangular type boxes. I don't think many of us work in round workplaces, but obviously we're going to be dealing with workplaces of varying sizes. The guidelines in that first slide from the government was 10 persons in workplaces, but obviously we might have some office type environments where at any peak time they might have had 30 or 40 people, but they probably had a larger land footprint or a larger floor space to be able to accommodate those. The key there is thinking of a 4 square metre space. Even with the change from 1 June for restaurants and cafes, government are talking about that, removing some of the tables and chairs, removing some of the desks, so as to provide greater spacing between people. Continue to make sure you've got the hand sanitizer available. Do talk to staff about making sure they do wash their hands. One of our clients we visit regularly, they have it in there on the wall in the bathrooms now. All staff must wash their hands before returning. We'd like to, amazing obviously that we've heard that so widespread. Social commentators talking about how good it is now that everyone now does certainly wash their hands and there's no bad habits. But I'd stress that's probably really important to put that message forward, and having signage in the bathroom as a reminder to anyone before they walk out the door is certainly worth consideration. Do make the wipes available to enable staff. We do hot desking here, and so the COVID-19 can remain on surfaces for a number of days on some surfaces. So important to make wipes available to enable people to clean down their desks, their keyboards, their mouse, particularly if there's any sharing of those in workplaces. If practical, do continue to allow people to work from home. If you're going to have obviously problems with accommodating people within your workspaces, and I have no doubt that it may be a blend of some people working from the office and some others still continue to work from home.
So of course we've all by now most likely heard about the COVID app. The COVID Safe app, and certainly one of the things that comes up a lot is the privacy issue. People, they're a bit concerned about being tracked. I think one of the first things I thought to myself here was, does everyone have a secret lair that they're hiding away from the government? I'm not too sure. I mean, when you do download an app next time on your phone, just have a look at the permissions you give that app. If you have LinkedIn, Facebook, any Instagram, any social media app, you'll already see once you install it, you're giving it access to your contacts, your text messages, your images, a whole range of things. But for some reason, the COVID Safe app has hit a really sore spot amongst the community. So I certainly have it, and I'd recommend everybody else too. But it is important to remember that it cannot be mandated. So essentially, you can't ask your employees, essentially force them to download it. You do need your phone, of course, to be turned on and for your Bluetooth setting to be turned on as well. and it does alert people if you have been more than 15 minutes close to someone who has been affected. So again, it's not mandatory. It is an additional safeguard, and we are seeing that unions and employee groups are indeed supportive of the app. So again, I would recommend it, especially now that we're allowed to be out and about during the weekend. I was in Brunswick on Sunday, and the park had just come alive. So while everybody was, within that kind of group allowance and maintaining distances from other groups, I do think us as a society, we have a large population. We're talking about a highly contagious virus. I think we're actually quite lucky to have these kinds of tools available to us. So again, I recommend using it.
If you're like yourself, ourselves, and in your business, you may have a need for your staff to go and visit other clients' premises. Again, consistent with the advice, emphasis on consulting with your staff, do talk to them about the specifics of going to those other clients' workplaces. You're obviously going to encourage them to use the sanitizer and facilities that are available at the client's premises, but obviously it has to be there for them to use. So I encourage your staff to actively look for those facilities, to ask the questions if they can't find them, so that the client is looking after their needs as well. Yes, you definitely have the same legal duties that apply even when you send your employees elsewhere. Zoom and Teams have been great resources over the last 2 months. They've certainly grown in popularity, and there's certainly capacity to share files via Teams and other electronic medium. So it's not necessary. We're quickly learning it's not necessary to spend so much time in other workplaces. We can get the files, we can do our audits and resources, write our reports and exchange documentation. Obviously, email's always been available. So still consider using those other mediums. Even in workplaces, you might have a need to have a half dozen staff members conduct a meeting. Zoom's a useful resource, even in their own offices, to hook up a meeting at a particular time of day, schedule it in, and still have everyone face-to-face just on the computer screens. So do think of other alternative means of how you can engage with the people. Just as you would in your own workplace, we have a writing premise here that if at any point in time we feel unsafe, well, we stop work. Similar, if you have any of your staff going to your client's premises, and if they have any concern for their safety or well-being, their safety is paramount. You should give them your blessing to come back to you, report, but to leave the premises if the workplace isn't safe. And you can see we stopped pointed just as a guide there to some of the services where COVID-19 can remain on the service for some time. So emphasis there around obviously going to other workplaces. We don't know what those environments are going to be like.
Of course, now that so many people aren't isolating, we do got to remember the current limits, which is 5 people indoors and then 10 people outdoors. Of course, we are still encouraging using a high level of personal hygiene and to maintain social distancing and avoid unnecessary trips as well. So one of the tips I gave in a previous webinar is obviously shopping centres are quite busy areas. You can order it online. You can either pick it up in store. I spent 5 minutes getting mine, or you can get it delivered. And it has to be used in conjunction with controls that have already been put in place by other workplaces. Now, it's also a good time to remember that we, of course, we share our homes with family members, and we do have sons, daughters who are going out to work, now visiting friends and then coming back home. So please just make sure that they're kept aware of the kinds of precautions that need to be taken, and that by all means, this isn't a time for complacency either. So that's just something worth keeping in mind.
Do encourage them to still maintain the 1.5 even amongst them for their friends. they can sit around and have a few drinks, but just a couple of a metre and a half away from each other. Do, especially if you've got teenagers like I do talk to them to make sure that they're still maintaining the good practices. If anyone does come to the workplace, Josh Frydenberg last week, the National Treasurer, was having a coughing fit in Parliament and had to stop his speech and go and get tested. Thankfully, he was able to come back and report that he tested negative. But when he reported it through Twitter that he had tested negative, he said, "I went and did the testing erring on the side of an abundance of caution." Well, there's some nice buzzwords. To how you manage staff, I would probably take that as a rule of thumb for engaging with any staff who might come to the workplace. Do err on the side of an abundance of caution. So do talk to your staff. Do make sure that we're introducing I've seen this in a few workplaces, where they've got questionnaires for staff to fill out, to ask them, have you travelled overseas? Has a member of your family come in, had any symptoms or any signs of illness? If anyone is showing any signs or symptoms, do ask them to go and get tested, but to remain at home until they can get those test results back. An important message that came out last week also was for those who have gone and taken advantage, they're now up to about 115,000 tests in Victoria alone, which is a great milestone. The message was that even if you've had a test and you've tested negative, do not presume that you're therefore in the clear forever thereafter. Obviously, it's an ongoing issue. Hopefully we'll see the numbers drop off and the daily head count will drop off consistently in future times, but there's still that risk of clusters here and there, and so people need to remain vigilant and may still develop symptoms at some future point.
So do keep in mind that you will, for a lot of our clients, we're seeing people still working from home. So work has to be performed consistently with the working from home policy. So you really need somewhere, your employees need somewhere to work that is, of course, set up for the type of work they're doing. So it's not about, just opening the laptop in bed and spending all day there. We want to make sure that you're actually sitting at an appropriate desk for the type of work that you're doing. Regular meetings, please have them with your employees just to gauge their current well-being, any kind of work progress, and also the challenges they're having. Because we are working from remote areas now, there can be potential things that we're not kind of putting our hand up for. So just keep in touch with your team. Do investigate government tools which enable financial support. So as mentioned, we're not going to go into that, but please have a look at what is available. And also, as much as possible, do clarify the employment status with employees. We know it's very hard to do, but it's very hard to work when you have a question mark over your head. So just keep that open dialogue. And again, just make sure aspects such as, how they're sitting, the lighting, and of course, electrical hazards always a big thing at home. We don't seem to care that much if we're draping a cable across the kitchen, as opposed to, if you have a cable somewhere in your normal work environment. So be mindful of that. And if anything, transparency, just be transparent with your workforce with what's going on and make sure everyone's on the same page. So it's certainly a good time to be discussing the types of tools that you can use for employees working from home. Again, here at Anitech Consulting, we've provided you with a free tool available for download from our website, which is the Working From Home Assessment Form. And much like the other tools that we discussed today, it'll pretty much hold your hand through the whole process, and you can actually provide this to your employees and ask them to send it back. So it's just a good prompt to make them think about the types of hazards that are in their work environment. And of course, if there is anything that needs to be corrected, then it enables you to do that as well. So certainly recommend you go check that out.
With people coming back to work, given it's nearly sort of 6 or 7 weeks that people have been at home or working from home or not able to come to work, um, people not able to come to work every day also, only maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week. Uh, COVID-19 is certainly, apart from obviously those having contracted the illness, will have had a physical toll on people, even those who remain at home. People will have obviously had sleepless nights, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of thinking. Sleep patterns have certainly been disrupted. People will have been having naps during the course of the day, not like the guy in the chair at the office desk there, but probably going to bed and snuggling up under the doona. And people are going to need time to physically adapt to coming back to work. I remind you again of the employer's duty to monitor the health of their employees. And this is something that employers are going to need to be particularly conscious of. If they're in process type environments, on machinery, workplace fatigue will be an issue. You need to keep an eye on them. Again, consult with them, flag as an issue, and make sure you ask them to make you aware if they are experiencing any problems or difficulties. Please also consider that whilst there is obviously allowances for people to come back to work now, that's not applying to everybody, and there will be lots of people still working from home or not able to go back to work yet. With the return to schools, it's currently only open to grades prep to 2 and years 11 to 12. And so all the years in between, you still have all those kids at home. And so some working parents are still not able to come back to work. Alternatively, their partners may or may not be able to come back to work also. And they still have their family needs to take care of. They can't shuffle the kids off to the grandparents or elsewhere. And so you will have to be cautious there. Make sure that you do make some allowances. Listen to what the employees have to say and take into account their particular circumstances. And obviously, it's going to be there may be some challenges there to work through, but do try to be patient. Safe Work Australia, in preparing for this, I was looking at what resources are available, and they have some very good checklists and some very good posters. I strongly encourage the display. There's about half a dozen posters they've got available. They pretty much cover off most of the workplace themes and good, well-crafted messages in them. And I'd strongly encourage the use of these resources. So yeah, do go to those links there, and you'll find the posters and the checklists, and well worth consideration.
Okay, so for the next few slides, we're going to talk about mental health. And I think I'm going to start by saying that it can be hard being positive. It actually takes quite a lot of work. And I think now more than ever, we're seeing, we're starting to see, we haven't, we're only beginning to essentially see the kind of the impact that this is having on us and as a society in general. I think it was Beyond Blue, they've seen at least a 40% increase in the number of calls. So by all means, at this point, it's more important now than ever to start implementing mental health tools, not only for your employees, but for yourself as well. So the one that I want to discuss is this one by the Black Dog Institute, which is called My Compass. Now it can be accessed via your phone, it can be accessed on a desktop. It's a really straightforward tool. I've started using it myself because I believe you have to practice what you preach. So the whole point of the My Compass tool is essentially it's an all-in-one mental health tool kit, which goes for, well, they recommend it goes for 7 weeks. It's got a whole range of different interactive activities. They go for about 10 to 15 minutes each, but it can really help you just deal with the types of thoughts and feelings and the behaviors that might be causing you a bit of grief at this point. So it's actually completely tailored. You enter in your details, it goes through a bit of a quiz, and it'll base a program on what you have entered. one of the main reasons I actually prefer recommending this tool is that it actually has been scientifically proven to help people when it comes to mild to moderate depression and anxiety and stress. So certainly when we're talking about the more severe cases, that's when we are talking about something a bit more extreme, such as calling Lifeline. But I'd certainly recommend either Google Black Dog Institute or go to My Compass. Check out the whole website, actually. They've got a whole range of just really helpful tips. But now more than ever, it's really important to start communicating this to employees. And by all means, check it out yourself as well.
Do take the opportunity to, with all the things you're going to be talking to staff, to just ask them, are they okay? How are they feeling? Encourage them to talk to yourself or any of their peers, so as to help you know whether they're experiencing any mental health problems or issues. And obviously that's something you would do at other times if we were at work. And Are You OK Days, and it's a great example that comes around once a year, where everyone's encouraged to ask that question. Well, it's probably worthwhile asking that question maybe 3 or 4 times this year, to touch base with your staff and just ask that their mental health is that they are in good mental health. So use the resources that are available, the posters, the resources that AnyTech have pointed you to today. Do jump on our website and download those materials. Again, I stress the emphasis of consulting with your employees, not just from the point of view of your legal duties, but also to instill confidence in them, to look after their well-being, but also to make them feel comfortable in coming back to the workplace, that they know that their safety is being taken care of. Be aware of those additional risks, not just about the people coming with the coughs or splutters, but the fatigue, the mental health, the family pressures that exist in the background, the things that you may not necessarily see, but you have to certainly be conscious and aware of. And in terms of your overall legal duties, well, all those things can come into play. If you have people working from home, have them use those resources that are available, the work from home assessment, to give it back to you, make sure that they're doing the right things in their workplace. If they're working at home, your legal duties extend to their home. That resource will help you to make sure that you're providing a safe workplace as a check, by making sure that they're doing the right things by having the good environment to perform their work safely from. And use the infectious diseases checklist to do the inspections there. And this is again thinking on Friday as preparing the presentation, and thinking about the environment which we're in. It's not business as normal. Obviously, a lot of our businesses are dependent upon clients. I've delivered many OH consultancies, and I go through all the information that the businesses need to know. And obviously, it's overwhelming to think about what they need to do in terms of health and safety. And I suggest to them the best way to tackle all those things, because you can't do them all overnight, is to have a plan. Now, this is a good thing to think about, things that are not business as normal. The other parts of your business that you should give consideration to now while it's quiet, to implement your systems or to review your systems to make sure that you're geared up for when things pick up again, so you're not trying to play catch up, and try to take the opportunity to get ahead of the game. So it's now is probably a good time as ever to look at what systems you have. We're about 6 weeks away in Victoria to the introduction of the new workplace manslaughter laws that come in from 1 July. Well, if ever I could think of probably an important reason to make sure your OHS house is in order, well, that'd probably be an important, good one. Now is probably a good time to have someone come in and look at your OHS systems and make sure that you have your house in order. At AnyTech, that slide, we provide that breadth of services. So we have a number of specialists within the team who have the skills in each of those areas who can assist you in your business. And that is where you can find us. We'll jump to the Q&A slides. So stop the share.
So thank you for that. What we might do now is if anybody has some questions. Sorry, I know we're pixelated. I don't know if it's the
our camera or yours.
Our camera or the internet at this point, but it won't matter too much. So what we'll do is if you do have questions, by all means, just pop it in the chat below. We'll have a bit of a read through it, then probably point the finger, try and figure out who's best to answer it, and go from there. Of course, if you don't quite know, if you may have questions later or don't know quite how to word, you can give us a call or shoot us an email as well.
So we'll take the questions on the Q&A or the chat there, and you have that capacity there. So if you want to key in some questions, not a problem. But if you, it's often the case that business or people think about questions later or don't want to ask a question now, do feel free to send it in an email, and we'll get back to you if we have to, and provide you with the answers necessary. So we'll give it a moment to see if any questions come through. No,
I don't think we have any questions come through.
No questions, and well, that's good. We'd like to think we've covered off the messages clearly enough. As I suggested at the start, for all of the information we ran through, if you're ticking those boxes and you've got those things covered, terrific. We're trying to provide as much information as we can to pick up on all the broad messages we're hearing and seeing, and so as to make sure that we help our clients to make sure that they're covering as much as they can. So with that, no questions, we'll bid you adieu, and good afternoon.
Thank you all for your time. Take care.
We'll talk again. Take care. Bye-bye.